Welcome to Culture Pulse. In this episode, I'm joined by Katarina Kahu, people partner at Stargate Hydrogen.
Passion is one that is there for everyone, and that's about passion for the environment and for your work. We are figuring out how to keep that flexibility while part of the team, can't be flexible.
If anyone has any questions about that, they can perhaps message us after they listen. Different approaches. Let's put it this way. Welcome to Culture Pulse. In this episode, I'm joined by Katarina Kahu, people partner at Stargate Hydrogen. Stargate is a company driving innovation in green hydrogen to combat climate change. Katarina plays a key role in building strong teams and creating a workplace culture that supports their inspiring mission. Today, we'll chat about Katarina's journey in HR, how she approaches team building in the renewable energy sector, and the challenges of scaling in a high-growth environment. Katarina will also share some advice for HR professionals working in fast-paced industries. Welcome, Katarina. I'm so happy to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time today. How are you feeling? All good?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today and seeing how it goes.
Perfect. Yes, I'm really excited to learn more. It's a bit different industry, something unique. So I'm sure it's gonna be super interesting to see how you tackling the HR matters at Stargate. So, but before we get there, for those who don't know you, could you tell us a little bit more about your journey in HR? How did you get into it? What is your story?
Yes, of course. So. My journey in HR. I'll be honest with you, I didn't start in HR, so I didn't grow up thinking like I'm gonna be a recruiter or something like this. I actually started out in hospitality, so I studied hotel management, and through my studies in The Hague, in the Netherlands, I found my way to HR. So I've always loved people, and that's also what I loved about hospitality, that it's a human-focused industry. And I think in that sense, the jump to HR was a very logical one for me. After my bachelor's, I went into a master's in human resource studies, and they're already kind of focused more on the HR side. And from there, started first working in a hotel in the HR. Then I completely switched sector and went into media, so like newspapers, online media, and TV, and worked in an HR team in an Estonian company in that sector, and then made the switch over to where I am today, so working in the hydrogen industry, which for me is still very new, even though I've been here for 2 years now. But I'm learning every day. And my roles have all kind of been a little bit of everything. So I've always done recruitment. And then next to that, I've also done either a bit of learning and development or office management and all the daily things that an HR role involves.
Can you share some milestones on this journey that kind of brought you into this industry specifically, or was it more like a coincidence?
I think the biggest turning point that got me into my position at Stargate Hydrogen was after I had been at my previous company for about a year and a half. I kind of started to get the feeling that I wasn't relating to the company mission enough. And that actually was sparked because we had a training that was all about the company values. And I think I wasn't even a participant. I was the one kind of carrying out the training. Through that process, I realized wow, I actually don't connect to these values at all. And I really loved my job there because it was a big team and we had this great synergy, and on a personal level I really loved going to work every day. But then I realized that what the company is actually doing doesn't really speak to me. And I spoke to my manager and my team about it and kind of started looking around. And I knew that what I was looking for was a company where I could relate to the mission. And I was also looking for an international team. So I grew up moving around a lot, so I was really missing that side, working in a 100% Estonian company. I started looking around, and then I did a lot of interviews. I think at one point I actually left my previous company without having a new position. So I was unemployed for a little bit and really took the time to figure out what it is that I want to do next and not just take the next random opportunity. Then I had, as it usually goes, nothing happened, didn't reach an offer anywhere. And then I suddenly had 2 offers on the table and had to make a decision really quickly. But I chose this company because even though I didn't know anything about hydrogen, it was clear to me that we're working on something that is aimed at making the world a better place. It's a green mission that we have, and after spending 2 years here, it's really clear to me that that's what motivates everybody who joins this team. And the second side was the international team. So when I joined, we were 15 people. Today we're around 65. So I knew that I would have the opportunity to recruit lots of people from abroad as well, and that seemed super exciting to me.
Yeah, sounds good. So how would you say like your role kind of evolved from the moment you joined Stargate to today? Obviously, you said you grew from 15 to 65 people. I'm assuming that impacts many areas of the business.
Yes, 100%. So I think one of the biggest changes is, when you're 15, it's really easy to do everything manually. Like you have enough time to really put into every person. And even though 65 isn't that big when we look at like global company sizes, it's still way bigger than we were. So over the past 2 years, we've put a lot of focus into how can we streamline processes. How can we save more of our time, not only in HR, also in finance, in other departments? What are the ways that we can have things be easier and smoother for both sides? So that has involved taking on different softwares, setting them up. When I joined, we were recruiting using Excel. One of my first projects was actually setting up a recruitment tool, and now we're already on our second one. So it's things like that have been a big part of the focus. And I think another thing which has been and still continues to be super important is communication. So when you're 15 people and you all sit in one open office space, you can just shout across the room and everyone will hear you. The bigger we grow, the harder it is to get all the important information to everyone who should hear it. So that's something we're working on as well.
Okay, so this is still work in progress, or could you already share some ideas that you have?
Well, since we joined, this isn't my initiative. It's always been a part of Stargate. We have an all-hands meeting every week. I think that's actually a very common practice across many companies, and it works. It's we have an hourly meeting every week. It's always at the same time. It's actually at a bit of an unusual time. So it's on Monday evenings from 6 to 7.
Oh.
Yes,
okay.
But we have a flexible work environment, so that doesn't mean that Mondays are just always longer days. You can balance out that extra time in the rest of the week. But we've kept it at this maybe unusual time because that means people are less likely to kind of override it with other meetings that usually don't take place on Monday evenings. And it's a great way to keep everyone updated about what's going on in the company. So that's one way that we do it. And otherwise, I'd say we're still very much having a work in progress with how to keep the communication going. One initiative that our management started was actually like a Q&A session where people were able to ask about anything and everything, and the management team answered those questions. So we've had one of those sessions so far, and it received really, really positive feedback. And it also kind of shed light on what are we missing, what are people wondering about, and can give us kind of inspiration for what to keep a better
Working
eye on
on.
going forward. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think just creating the culture where people are open to share and ask questions, that's already, the first step to success when it comes to communication, for sure. Stargate is tackling climate change in obviously very innovative ways. I was wondering, how do you kind of use the company's mission to maybe influence the culture or recruitment strategies? You did mention before that many people, including you, joined the company because of the mission. So that's amazing. I think that's what every company could only wish for. Just wondering how does the mission influence like the culture and maybe talent acquisition, recruitment in general?
So I think it's kind of funny where I came from a company where I couldn't really relate to the mission, and then in this company relating to the mission is somewhat given for everyone, because I'm sure there are people who aren't motivated by a green mission, but I think it's like a trend or kind of something that everybody wants to contribute to in a way. So from that side, I think the baseline, let's do something that's better for the world, is fairly easy to get. And I can see that in everyone who applies to the company is motivated by that. Many people will come from, for example, the oil and gas industry and say like, I've been working in this industry for so long and I want to work now towards a greener future. So I can also see that mind shift in people taking place. But maybe what is kind of the side of the mission that is not harder to connect to but different is the innovation. So we are a young technology company. We're building something from the ground up. So you definitely have to have the motivation to kind of put in the long hours, build something from scratch, and that side I can see in our engineers. So we have all kinds of engineers, chemical, process, mechanical, people that are really experts in the field, and I can see them having such a passion for their work. Like they are just so genuinely interested in all the technical details of the product that we are building, and that's something that we're looking for throughout the recruitment process as well. So it has to be something that drives you in order to be successful in this company.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure it helps people stay longer when they work with something that they're so passionate about.
Yes, exactly. Actually, passion is one of our values as well.
Okay, so speaking of values, can you share more about the values and kind of how they shape the, day to day and maybe also the long-term goals for you guys?
Passion I already kind of covered with the last
Yeah.
answer, but we keep in mind the values throughout our recruitment process, and I don't mean that in sense like we literally ask about every value.
Yeah.
But when I mean we could, but we don't. So we kind of evaluate that, and in discussions with my hiring managers or hiring teams, we consider whether the person has those characteristics that we're looking for. So passion is one that is there for everyone, and that's about passion for the environment and for your work. Then one of our values, which I think speaks really clearly of what it's like to work at Stargate, is sense of urgency. So this value, it could also kind of be seen as like, what do you mean? Is it always urgent in the company?
I understand
People...
exactly what you mean. Some people have it, some people don't.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of two-sided. One is the planet isn't waiting for us. So the faster we can come up with these greener solutions, the faster we can do good. And secondly, the competitors aren't waiting either. So you have to have a sense of urgency for both those reasons. And that really does mean that sometimes, the days are longer or the projects require more effort than initially it seems. But then that's exactly why we have this flexible work environment to kind of keep everybody balanced. And even if some periods are harder and longer, then they balance out with some easier and calmer moments where you can take a breath and reflect.
So you said you have the flexible work environment. How does that look in practice?
While we were still growing, we had most of our positions kind of office-based positions where it's obviously very easy to be flexible. That means you can kind of work either from a different location or somewhat be flexible in your time. So we have the general agreement that you are at least reachable Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But, if you have, I don't know, a personal appointment, or you got to walk your dog or pick up your children or whatever it is that is in your personal life important, then nobody is counting like the hours that you sit at your desk. So what's important is that the work is done and that it's done well. When you do it, doesn't really matter. So our CEO has said that we would like to hire people, smart people who are capable of managing their own work time. And that's how it has gone so far. Of course, I do want to mention that we are shifting, or not shifting, but we are a production company at the core, which means that our production team is growing. And there are some positions where, you just can't take your work home. Like you can't assemble the product at home. So I would say right now we are very much at a turning point where we are figuring out how to keep that flexibility while part of the team, can't be flexible or as flexible at least. So that's something we're facing right now. And we have just moved office and production. So we used to be in 2 locations and now we're in 1. So we also want to encourage people to be physically there to actually benefit from the fact that we're all in one place now.
I do think it's like an interesting situation because usually companies try to keep obviously all the setup coherent for all employees, but in this case, which I'm sure they understand, it's not fully possible. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how you tackle it because it is a unique situation.
I think it's like, for me, this is my first time in this kind of industry. So I think it's common in production companies that is a problem that you face. And I've seen companies go both ways. So you can either say, listen, if you end up in an office role, good for you, you can enjoy the flexibility. Or you can kind of go the way where you say, no, it has to be equal for everyone, and the flexibility is like taken away from everyone in that case.
So we touched upon scaling a little bit and growing the team. Just wondering also with kind of those 2 different verticals within the business, like what would you say were your biggest challenges scaling the team at Stargate so far, and what are you kind of facing right now with, all the changes coming up?
So the biggest challenge is that it's a fairly niche skill set that we're looking for, which means that we definitely can't find all the talent that we need here in Estonia. We have a lot of awesome people from Estonia who are already on the team, but this is like one of the first hydrogen companies in Estonia. So, if we're looking for people who already have years of experience, we just simply won't find them here. So that means like it's a challenge in the sense that we have to look outside of Estonia, which affects like the hiring timelines. You have to find people who are willing to relocate, also able to relocate, and also then we have to have the knowledge to guide them through that process. And it also affects salary levels because salaries in Estonia just aren't comparable to those in Central Europe. I mean, it's also not like the cost of living is not comparable, but it's hard to convince people to take a step down if they're already somewhere higher up there.
So what would you say for those companies who are facing a similar challenge? Also in different fields in Estonia, I think there is so much local talent, but since, there is definitely higher demand, many companies rely heavily on relocations. And obviously there are those challenges related to salary levels in different countries. So how, say, you define the countries you would be sourcing from based on that? Just would be interesting to hear.
So we've actually sourced from lots of different countries. We've had people join us from Germany, Spain, South America, India, and like kind of all over. So I would say my advice there is don't limit yourself to one specific country. And even though I did mention the salary level challenges, you know, we've also had candidates that come to us and say like, listen, I know you won't meet my Central European salary expectation. So you don't need to assume that people just definitely won't consider Estonia just because they're living in a different country. So we've had some nice surprises there. And if you're hiring from further, like further outside, or it's a non-EU country where the person is coming from, then my number one recommendation is consider at least 3 months, probably a little bit more, until the person can join you. And then also, consult with experts. We have a lot of great relocation companies. I think definitely elsewhere in the world, but in Estonia too. There's Jobatical and Move My Talent, and we've worked with both of them. And also just consulting with the government. Anyways, if you have questions about, you have questions about visas and so on, there's helplines for that, and we use them a lot.
So do you already during the process kind of educate the candidates who've never been to Estonia kind of what to expect? I know we have many tools to do that. There is the relocation guide that I believe is every year updated. Like you said, we also work with many relocation companies. So I know they're doing an amazing job in Estonia and in promoting the country in general, on top of just making the process as smooth as possible. But just wondering, how do you guys approach it when you have someone coming from, somewhere very exotic compared to Estonia?
That's a good topic. So I always try to actually already kick it off in the first meeting. So even if it's only my first 30-minute interview with the candidate, I already ask them, do you know what it's like here? Do you know that it's cold and dark for half of the year? Especially if they're coming from somewhere sunny and warm. Because next to like, do you actually want to do the job and do you have the skills? Relocation is a huge thing. And even though it seems like, it's usually
no big deal.
It's a big deal. So I try to breach that topic from the beginning already, and the tools that you mentioned. So the relocation guide, I love it. I always use it.
Yes.
They've done a really good job. I think the last version is actually like, I laughed reading it. So
yeah, me too. I think there were some points about the weather as well.
Yes, and our sauna culture,
Yeah.
It's easy to forget that things that seem normal to us might be weird for other people. So
that is true.
Yes, I use the relocation guide. And actually one other step in our recruitment process, so for candidates who have reached the final round, we will fly them in to see us here. So one of the reasons is because we want to meet the people face to face and have them meet the team and see our working environment, but also to see Estonia. And we try to always kind of plan that visit so they have at least time to do a round in the city or explore a little bit on their own. I've had candidates who say like, great, I'll come with my wife, we'll make a little vacation out of it, and like they really make the most of it. And that mentality also shows me like, okay, you're somebody who is ready to consider relocation for real. Yeah, exactly.
So what are kind of your ways and tips to attract and retain talent in such a specific niche industry?
That the key there is remembering that we're all human beings. So it's kind of like throwing money at people isn't endlessly going to motivate them. So I think it's about all the little things that we do which affect it. So we put quite a lot of emphasis into our company culture in terms of things we've kind of already covered, like communication and knowledge sharing. So we have some traditions like Stargate Academy. So that's where new people are able to introduce themselves to everybody through a presentation. And the point is kind of to share about what you've done in the past so that people know what kind of experience you have and where you might be able to contribute that isn't necessarily related to your core tasks at Stargate. So we have those sessions about once a month, at least at the rate of new joiners that we've had recently. The other thing is Stargate Book Club, which for the past months has been on pause, but will continue again next year, where we also put an emphasis on knowledge sharing and learning new things. So that's something that we do, helps people stay motivated and stay learning. And then, of course, the fun side, so the team events and the company events, which I really enjoy. It's a big part of my job, organizing the larger events like summer event and winter event, and then much smaller things like bowling or burgers and beers or whatever it is. But taking time to also bond with each other outside of the specific work context.
Yeah, so do you already have any plans for the winter party?
Yes.
Christmas
Our
party?
winter party is this Friday. I'm
Oh,
assuming
wow,
that
okay.
yes, I'm assuming that this won't go out at least before then, so I can share the details because we haven't told the team too much.
Yes.
But we'll be painting, or it's kind of like creative painting. So there's a company here in Estonia where they organize that, and you get a big canvas, and then you are
Wow.
divided into teams, and it will be very fun. And then, of course, dinner and drinks, and we also have a employee award ceremony taking place
Okay.
there.
So what is that about? Is it only
Um,
strictly connected to work or some like initiative or some other things that you can be awarded for at Stargate?
This is actually the second year we are doing that, so we could almost already call it a tradition. But we created 6 awards categories last year. So 4 of them are like derived directly out of our values. And then we have 2 separate awards. One is for, what is it called? I don't know exactly, but like the award goes to the new joiner of the year. So for people who joined that year can only be nominated in that category. And then the last one goes to mentor of the year. So that is for somebody who does either an exceptional job of leading a team or are just a mentor to others in another way. And the way we built it up, I actually stole this idea from my previous company.
You did.
Yes.
Well, it's good to
It's
steal the good
done.
ideas, nothing wrong with that.
Yes, yes. And they know that I stole it, so it's okay. But yeah, so it's done through nominations. So everybody in the team can nominate anyone else. So it's not like the management decides or some specific body of people decides, but everybody can nominate anyone. And then the final round is a vote. So it's by the people for the people.
I love that. And it does seem like the culture plays such a huge role at Stargate. So just wondering, like, what does culture mean to you personally as someone who's obviously driving it in this company as well?
So I saw this thing on LinkedIn. It's definitely not something I came up with myself, but it says that culture is how your employees feel on Sunday night. That has really, like, it spoke to me and it has stuck with me. And I often think about it myself on Sunday night. So I think it's kind of, culture is, when it's good, you don't notice it. And as soon as it's off, then it bothers you.
That is true. And it's funny because that was also kind of our inspiration when we started our company, and we called it Magic Mondays because we felt like people just drag the Mondays and they're not happy. So we thought, okay, like, what if we just work with companies that people will enjoy working for? Then maybe, the Mondays won't be that gray anymore. So it kind of like relates to that quote that you found on LinkedIn as well. So in terms of like the culture and diversity and inclusion, and just wondering if you have thought already, or if you already have in place any like initiatives to kind of foster this like inclusive work environment as well.
I think that's something that we're very much in the beginning with, because in the past years, the growth has been our main focus. The best I can kind of say is it's through little things that I've started to notice that we need to put effort into that. For example, this year's summer event, we all went to a place in Estonia and we gathered there. And we had activities, and then around 6 or 7, I think, was the dinner. And one of my colleagues, who is not from Estonia, said like, "Oh, why is the dinner so early?" And I realized that I automatically just scheduled the dinner kind of based on what is a normal dinner time for me. Whereas, some people eat dinner at 9. So it's those little things that I've noticed. Of course, dinner at the summer event is not such a tragic thing, and there was food the whole time, so it was not a problem. But it's those little things that are indicators that it's something that we should think about, and also adjust things that we maybe do automatically and consider how it might affect different people.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I love that example, because sometimes we think that this is something, huge, like, I don't know, ordering vegan food, or like, those little things are also important to keep in mind. And sometimes I remember when I worked in-house, I always thought, okay, I literally thought about everything. I'm 100% sure I thought about everything, organizing an event, and then you realize, no, you didn't. So of course, you need to find a balance. Like, you cannot go crazy, because it is not possible. But there are so many things. Like, when I think diversity and inclusion, I think about all those huge topics. But there are also those little things that really make a change. But it is a challenge to always make sure that we do think about everything, because at the end of the day, the HR teams are also human. And, even though we always try to be on top of the game, like, there are some things that you might forget.
Yes.
Or,
absolutely. Yeah, I just thought of another little example, because we just moved office. And of course, we spent lots of time planning and thinking and how can things be. And just last week, we kind of let everybody in, and now people are settling in. And immediately, we've actually created a wish list for all the things that we didn't think about that people are going to notice once they are actually sitting at the desk or sitting in the meeting room. So it's also a matter of helping yourself help others. So creating those channels or tools where people can communicate things that maybe are not diverse enough or inclusive enough.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes down to what we already talked about, kind of creating the safe space to share and kind of be open about things that can be improved, but maybe also the positive things, to have the positive reinforcement and a little gratitude for all the things that are done in the business. So that's super important. So obviously, big changes coming up with new offices. Can you kind of share with us what are the goals for Stargate for the upcoming year, and plans now that the company kind of continues to grow?
So I'll focus on the non-technical goals
Yes.
of the company.
Let's not talk about chemical engineering, because we might struggle here.
Yes, I definitely will struggle here. But so the goals, one which I may have briefly mentioned as well, is to have more people on site at the office. So with the last office, we kind of reached a point where we had more employees than desks. And it worked because of our flexibility, and we have people who also work from other cities within Estonia and only come irregularly. But now we've upgraded, we have space for everyone, and we want people to, or like the feedback that we received was some people weren't coming to the office because they didn't have their own space. So we wanted to create that now in the new office. And that's one of the goals within the next year, is to keep it that way, and as we grow as a company, also probably grow in space, in physical space that we take up. Yeah, what are my goals for next year? Haven't gotten there yet, I have to say.
You're still working on this year's goals until the
Yes,
last minute.
but I'd say we're gonna keep growing. That's for sure. We've kind of slowed down hiring towards the end of this year, also because we've been busy with the move. So that will pick up again next year. And I think for me personally, it's also a little bit more of structuring the hiring, or I'd say that's one of the challenges that I faced. That when you're working in a young company and you don't always know what, like, it's gradually become more structured, but in the beginning, you know, it wasn't clear what we're doing in half a year. So it's also kind of difficult to plan hiring half a year forward, and lots of roles come in like, oh, but I needed this person yesterday. So, yes. So as we move forward to kind of move away from that I needed this person yesterday method, and think a little bit forward and support hiring managers in doing that. Same with our learning needs. So I think it will be very much a year of focusing on structuring things and learning how to support the team better in my role.
Okay, so kind of moving away from the startup, maybe setup, into more scale up and a structured setup. I actually have quite a few, from what I noticed, young HR professional listeners on the podcast. So what I like to do at the end of every episode is kind of like find out a little bit more from people who've been successful in this job, in growing their career and building a strong HR career, and asking for a little advice for the younger generation. Just wondering, what do you think, what is the advice you would give to people who'd like to start their HR career or grow it in high growth industries like hydrogen, for example, green energy?
If that's something that attracts you or pulls you towards whatever industry, I think, but if you're interested in HR, my advice would be to ask lots of questions. And I think that's something I've not done enough of myself. So I think to this day, but especially when I was younger, it's kind of this fear of being wrong that often held me back. Whereas now I've kind of a little bit at least come out of my shell, and I'm more willing to admit when I don't know something, and rather benefit from all the experts and knowledgeable people that I have around me. And ask. So that's something that actually working in this industry has really forced me to do, because I don't understand anything about hydrogen or engineering, or, you know, I studied humans. So this is not my forte, and it has helped and kind of helped me reflect back to the HR side that it's also okay to ask questions about a topic that I should know about, but maybe don't know in depth enough about.
So at the beginning, when you first started, how did you learn? Were you like this typical independent self-learner, or did you have any leaders or any mentors or any book you've been reading religiously to get your knowledge in HR and in the field?
Well, for the first part of your question, I was definitely this typical goody two-shoes, that everything always has to be done and done well, regardless of how it's done. So I was more independent than looking for help around me. But I'd say what had a huge impact were actually my lecturers during my bachelor's. So that's when I was still studying hospitality management, but the study was very people focused, and we had lots of courses on working in teams, leadership, like those kinds of topics, which were very necessary for completing my university projects at the time, but have really carried over to the work that I do today. So my lecturers, there are a couple of them, one who was also my thesis supervisor, and some others were those who inspired me to go into this field. And actually my best friend, who doesn't live here in Estonia, but I've religiously stayed in contact with her, who also went into an HR direction, although she works more on the organizational and process side, is somebody that I always bounce ideas with, and we kind of keep each other inspired and alive on these topics.
I think that's so important, especially if you don't have like a massive team around you. You know, sometimes, especially in startups, I think the HR role can be a little lonely. And you need to dig and learn and, you know, look for information very often outside of the organization. So I think it's so important to have someone out there that you can just bounce ideas off each other.
100%. Also, if you're in Estonia, we have this HR Selt. It's like
Yes.
a network for HRians. I'm sure they exist outside of Estonia as well, and that's actually something I joined before I started at Stargate and after I quit my previous job, and what helped me actually find Stargate. So joining networks with people interested in the same things is helpful.
That's super helpful. I spoke to someone else about it on the podcast that I really loved coming into Estonia from more like a competitive environment and like HR, especially in recruitment, though, that it seemed that Estonians are very open-minded and welcoming to new people in those organizations. And it seems that everyone is very open to sharing knowledge. I mean, there is this Slack channel for HR professionals and recruiters. There is the HR organization. There is the Recruitment Thursday. So there are many things going on locally where if you want to find information or if you want to just find people you can learn from or, you know, just exchange ideas with, then it's super easy to do in Estonia.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's great. If anyone has any questions about that, they can perhaps message us after they listen. If they got to that part and have questions, they can message us, and I'm sure we can provide some more details. So before we wrapped, I have one more question. I mean, I think it's important in every job, but I feel like in HR, with all the changes and with the fast paced and with having to wear multiple hats at the same time, it's quite challenging to always stay kind of on top and always be motivated. So I'm always interested to hear from HR professionals, how do you do that? How do you stay motivated?
That is a great question. So I think maybe my answer is a little bit contradictory, but I stay motivated by taking time to turn off as well. And I think that's maybe something that's kind of also coming up now, like this culture of not having to always be on and answer, and especially in kind of the young company or startup environment where work days are not always 9 to 5, and you know, I have my notifications on and so on. I'm often answering in the evening, so I've lost track of it many times throughout the past 2 years, and I'm continuously having to remind myself to take a breath, switch it off, do other things, because it's usually in those moments when I stop thinking about work that I actually get the good ideas.
100%. And I can relate, because the first couple of years of like my professional journey, I was the person who was always, you know, answering to email in 5 seconds, and I'd never stop. But then at some point you realize, actually, if you take a break and you go for a walk during the day, you're gonna come up with ideas and be more motivated to do things. It's definitely a learning curve. I don't think you get there straight away. You want to be, you know, the high performer and always, but sometimes, you know, you need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward.
And I think that's something I'm gonna keep learning over and over again, because I like to be that person that answers emails within 5 seconds. So it's really like a fight against myself. sometimes, but it pays off, and it's so necessary. And it's exactly what you said. Sometimes it's enough to take a 30-minute walk in the middle of the day. But it's also being very conscious about the devices are so smart today. Like, I've set up my notifications so that they automatically switch off in the evenings, and I don't see them until my workday starts. And there's all these little things that you can do to trigger your brain to kind of process it in the right way. So it's just about finding what works for you.
Yes, I think if we would start talking about productivity and like how to do all those things, like we would probably have another hour podcast. I'm very passionate about that topic too, and tried different approaches. Let's put it this way. I think it's interesting. Like we work a lot with the US market, and then we work with Estonian market, and you are bombarded with very different point of views on that, like the hustle mentality contra, take care of your mental health and your work-life balance to prevent the burnout and make sure you're happy and you're productive. So it's also very interesting for me to try to find a balance, and always super interested to see what other people do to keep it. But I'm sure that you have a very healthy approach to that.
It works better on some days than on others. But,
okay.
I'm finding my way.
Okay, well, sounds great. And I think this is a good point to wrap it up for today. So thank you so much, Katarina. It was great having you, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. And yes, I'll definitely put your details under or above the episode. So if anyone would like to learn more about Stargate or potentially maybe join the team next year, I guess Katarina is the best person to reach out to.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been really nice speaking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Culture Pulse, the heartbeat of your workplace. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found some insights to take back to your team. Don't forget to subscribe for more discussions, and for all the latest updates on the podcast, follow Magic Monday Miami on LinkedIn. See you next time!